The fear of 13 is older than any of its explanations. The Last Supper, the Tarot card, the Unlucky Friday, these are stories attached to a cultural taboo that already existed, added afterward to give it a narrative. What is rarely asked is when the fear consolidated, and what was happening at that precise historical moment. The answer is the 17th and 18th centuries. The same period the Gregorian calendar was replacing the 13-month lunar tradition across Europe, and the same period Tartaria was disappearing from the maps. Ask someone why 13 is unlucky, and they will give you one of a small number of answers. The Last Supper had 13 participants. The 13th tarot card is death. Friday the 13th, though the specific reason for that combination's unluckiness is itself unclear in the folk accounts. These explanations share a character. They are stories. Post hoc narratives attached to a fear whose origin predates the stories, and whose function in the culture goes beyond the specific narrative content of any individual explanation. The fear of 13 is older than any of its explanations. The explanations were added later, attached to a fear that was already operational in the culture, to give the fear a story it could tell about itself. The question I want to ask is not what stories explain the fear of 13. It is when the fear of 13 became the operative cultural fact it is now, and what was happening at that time that made the transformation of 13 from a significant number to a dangerous one useful. Let me give you the before picture first. Before the fear became established, what was 13? In the astronomical and agricultural traditions that preceded the post-reset calendar system, 13 was the number of full moons in a solar year. Not approximately 13, not roughly 13. The solar year contains 12, 37 synodic lunar cycles, meaning approximately 12 1/3 full moons per year, which rounds to 13 full moons in years where the fractional cycle completes. Every third year or so, a solar year contains 13 full moons rather than 12. This astronomical fact is the foundation of the 13-month calendar tradition that appears across multiple pre-modern cultures. And it was the organizational basis of agricultural and ceremonial calendars in civilizations on multiple continents. The Mesoamerican calendar systems organized their count around the 13-day period, the trecena, as a fundamental unit. The Celtic tradition counted 13 lunar months per year, each with 28 days, producing the elegant lunar-solar calendar I've described in detail in previous investigations. The ancient Egyptian administrative calendar used 13 as the basis of its astronomical cycle calculations. These are not coincidences of independent invention. They are independent recognitions of the same astronomical fact, that the relationship between the solar year and the lunar cycle produces 13 as a fundamental organizing number. In the pre-reset European tradition, 13 was specifically associated with the full cycle of the moon's influence, with a complete count of the lunar year, with the organizational principle of celestial time that the astronomical clocks were built to display, and that the great calendar traditions of pre-modern Europe were built to track. The number was not dangerous. It was, if anything, potent, complete, associated with the totality of the lunar year, and with the astronomical intelligence required to track it. The transition from potent to dangerous is documentable in the historical record, not with precision, not with the clean before and after that a single decisive event would produce, but as a gradual shift, accelerating in the 17th century and essentially complete by the mid-18th century. That transformed 13 from a number of astronomical significance into a number of cultural taboo. The shift parallels with a correlation that I find impossible to dismiss as coincidence, the gradual dismantling of the lunar organized calendar traditions in European peasant and folk culture. The period in which 13 became dangerous is the same period in which the traditional agricultural calendars, organized around the lunar cycle, were being replaced by the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar, which was designed explicitly to regulate the celebration of Easter in relationship to a specific calculation involving the spring equinox, organizes the year into 12 irregular months rather than 13 regular ones. 12, not 13. The substitution of 12 for 13 in the organizational structure of the year required that 13 become, culturally, the wrong answer, the incomplete answer, the number you don't want to land on. Why does this matter? Because the shift from a 13 count to a 12 count calendar is not just a mathematical adjustment. It is a fundamental reorganization of how human beings relate to the natural cycles of the year. The 13-month lunar calendar keeps the population synchronized with the actual celestial cycle of the moon. The 12-month Gregorian calendar does not. The Gregorian months are of irregular length, designed to fit a 12 count into a solar year of 365 days, producing a calendar that is mathematically incoherent. Months of 28, 29, 30, and 31 days, quarters of unequal length, a year that cannot be divided evenly into weeks. The Gregorian calendar is, from the perspective of anyone trying to use it to track natural cycles, a deliberately obfuscating instrument. Who benefits from a calendar that makes it harder to track natural cycles? The same question I keep arriving at from different directions: the administrative system, the centralized scheduling apparatus, the organizations, religious and subsequently commercial and governmental, that need to coordinate the activities of large populations around a standard that they, the organizations, control. A population that tracks its time with reference to the moon, the actual visible moon in the actual sky, is a population that tracks its time with reference to something the administrative system cannot manage. The moon doesn't check in with the central authority. The moon runs on its own schedule, which happens to be 13 cycles per year, which happens to produce the kind of natural temporal organization that the 13-month calendar traditions had always maintained. Make 13 dangerous, and you make the moon dangerous. Not directly, not explicitly, but structurally. The culture that fears 13 is the culture that has lost its relationship with the 13th month, the 13th cycle, the organizational principle of the natural year. And the culture that has lost that relationship is easier to synchronize with an administrative clock, with a Gregorian calendar, with a schedule produced by the institutions, rather than by the sky. The specific timing of the 13th fear's cultural consolidation is what I keep returning to. The 17th and 18th centuries, the period of the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. The period in which the institutional calendar was being standardized across Europe and its colonial extensions. The period immediately preceding the cartographic erasure of Tartaria. The period in which the alternative knowledge systems, the lunar calendars, the astronomical clock traditions, the folk agricultural practices, organized around the actual movements of celestial bodies, were being replaced by the rational, centralized, administratively convenient systems of the new order. The fear of 13 was manufactured in this period, not by a committee, not by a decree, not by a specific decision that can be documented, but by the accumulated pressure of an administrative and religious system that needed to make the alternative count, the lunar count, the natural count, feel wrong, feel dangerous, feel like the kind of thing that rational, modern, enlightened people don't organize their lives around. The fear is the cultural residue of a deliberate marginalization. The superstition is the folk memory of something that was taken, dressed up in the language of irrational fear, so that no one would ask to have it back. What was taken is recoverable. The 13-month calendar is still mathematically elegant. 13 months of 28 days, plus one transitional day, equals 365. A solar year, perfect and repeating. The lunar cycle still runs at 29.5 days. Still produces 13 full moons in most solar years, still governs the biological rhythms of bodies that were calibrated to it over hundreds of thousands of years of natural selection. The number 13 is still the number of the natural year. The fear of it is a learned response, installed in the culture in the same period that the map of the civilization that used it was being erased. The same period. Not coincidence. Correlation of cause and effect. What the calendar replaced, the fear replaced alongside it. Both the new calendar and the new fear serve the same function, severing the population's relationship with a counting system that the administrative order could not control in favor of a counting system that it could. If the number 13 was made dangerous at precisely the historical moment when the 13-month calendar was being replaced by a system that made the population dependent on institutionally provided time, references, was the fear manufactured? And does it still serve the function it was installed to serve? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who has never questioned why that number feels wrong.